Hey guys, how's everyone doing tonight? All right. Is everybody doing all right? Can you hear this okay? Everything working? See a lot of folks here. Mike, Gilbert. Good to see you guys. Derek, Jamie, I'm good. I'm great. I'm hanging out here, doing some live teaching and having some fun. Gonna play a little guitar, hopefully answer some questions. New thing we're starting here at TrueFire is having these live events. So I'm coming to you from my studio, basically. Somewhere back here, you can probably see at least one of my dogs laying on the floor. And this is where I create lots of stuff, a few assorted guitars hanging on the wall and some stuff over here. So we're going to be doing some kind of cool stuff. This is billed as like 3 ways to spice up your blues rock soloing. So I'm really going to go over some just different concepts. And what I'm going to do is each concept I go over, I'll show you a few things. And then if anyone has any questions, I'll try to answer them. As you know, if you've done anything live like this before, there's a lot of questions go by in the scrolling by in the chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on those. But if I miss them, I'm sorry. Yes, you'll get a Riff magazine T-shirt, Rich. Absolutely. If you haven't checked out the Riff Journal, check that out because it's TrueFire's online magazine. It's pretty cool. Not just because I write for it, but because I get to interview amazing guitar players, like Steve Vai and Sonny Landreth and stuff like that. So that's a lot of fun. So let's get into a couple of these concepts and actually start doing some teaching. One of the first things I want to talk about and just give you maybe a different way to look at it is phrasing, all right? And how to approach phrasing and how you can get better at phrasing. Because one thing that I find a lot of All right, are we back? That was just sort of a, that was a test, right? All right, we're going to see if we can get that happening. Sorry. All right, are we back? That was just sort of a, that was a test, right? We're having a little bit of testing here. All right, we're going to see if we can get that happening. All right. Now. All right, are we back? Is everything good? I know I was just going to say something profound there right when that happened. So we hope it doesn't happen again. It was a some kind of malfunction here with everything we've downloaded. So jumping right back in to talking about phrasing, right? So I've had a lot of students that struggle with phrasing and knowing how to practice phrasing, how to basically you know, jump into actually working on phrasing, because you hear a player that sounds really good and is doing some cool stuff, and it's how they phrase things. So what does that mean and how can we do it? Well, I find the best way to get your head wrapped around how you can really do some cool stuff with phrasing without learning a lot of difficult things is just take a simple lick, like a blues lick, right? So we're going to be in our A minor pentatonic scale, and we're going to go simple as that, right? A lick that I guarantee everybody that's watching this can play, right? So then we're going to play that over the top of a jam track. So I've got a track that I just come in on one, right? So basically our jam track is going to be this, and you'll hear this roll. And so I'm just going to come in on one with that lick. Simple. So I'm just doing eighth notes so you get the feel of it. Now if I play that same thing, but I'm going to come in on the and, it's going to sound different. So you could do that with all kinds of different groups, right? Anything you play, I didn't change anything with the lick. I played the exact same lick. I just changed where I played it in the timing, in the groove. This is a great exercise to do with anything that you could play, right? I could play any kind of a lick, and a simple thing, straight down. Come in on the and. So when you take a lick like that, that seems like the only way to make it more interesting is to do something else with it. That's not really the case, right? The way you make it more interesting is shift it around, do stuff, different things with you. If you take a solo, a whole solo like that, like you take a lick, and you record that, a really cool thing to do is then record that and then take the whole thing and shift it by an eighth. Just move it over. You'll be amazed at what your solos sound like and all the differences in sounds. It's like you'll hear licks that you didn't even know you knew because you're just changing it around. So I think the coolest thing with rhythmic phrasing is to experiment like that with it. So rather than try to figure out all these different solos and how to come in these different spots, just take something simple, right? This is just doing it with eighth notes. So with eighth notes, it's pretty easy, right? We're pretty straightforward there. We could also do this with 16th notes. So it gets a little bit more interesting how that changes the feel. So if we had a 16th note riff now, you know, if you're just, you know, a basic player, you know, early beginner player, start with that. 16th notes means 4 notes per beat, right? So eighth notes, we count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 16th notes, we count 1E and a, 2E and a. So we've got 4 notes happening within one beat. So we could play these 4 notes within each beat. So it would be So if you're starting out, start there. If you're a little bit more advanced, here's the lick that I'm going to play over that, which is really simple, but it's using these notes. Basically playing 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4 on my middle 2 strings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up 4 notes at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then start here and go up 4, then here. And for my last 4, so we have simple, right? Like an exercise. But here's, so if you just drill on that, it gets pretty boring pretty fast. And the usefulness of it is, I think less than if you do it this way. So what I have here is a drum beat, right? Without any backing, without any rhythm track, just a simple groove. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that 16th note, simple little lick, and I'm going to start on the 1, on the downbeat. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift it, and instead of coming in right on the downbeat, I'm going to come in on the second 16th note. So instead of 1, I'm going to come in on the E, right? Because 16th notes are 1 E and a 2 E. So I'm not going to come in on 1, I'm going to come in on E, right? So what that happens, it moves the whole lick over. And you'll hear, I mean, this is the cool part about doing this, is that you hear the difference. You hear that phrasing shift, right? So here's my really simple straight drum beat, right? So 1 E and up. Hard to do it this slow, actually. So I'm going to try to do this and go on the downbeat. Right up. You get the feel, right? Now what if I come in on the E? All right, here we go. Exact same thing, but just shifted a 16th totally changes the feel, the groove, right? I could come in on the and, same thing. So we're either coming in on any one of the 4 16th notes that are available, right? So so that's got that total Led Zeppelin backwards beat thing going on, right? So it's kind of cool because it shows you that taking something simple, here's something I have a lot of students, they come to me and they say, all right, they're like, I can do that, Well, maybe you can do that just when it's a straight regular beat, but it's hard when you do it at a different spot in your 16th note phrase, all right? So I'm just playing with a basic drum beat there, but shifting it over a 16th every time, right? Does that make sense to everybody? I'm seeing, yes, I'm definitely alternate picking through that. And I'm just using a drum loop, right? So just a loop. So yes, if we were counting in, I'll do it without the loop. So I'm either coming in on 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, or I'm coming in on 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So you see that changes where the downbeat lies in the groove, right? So another really, really cool way to do this, right? Basically is to do a really simple chord progression. Now this is like one of my favorite things to do because it can take the most boring thing but make it interesting. So we're going to take power chords. Yeah, exciting. I know, power chords. We're going to go this power chord on A, and I'm going to play just 4. And then down to G. And then up to D. And back to A. So that's my rhythm. Right? Beginner stuff. But let's play it with the groove and then let's shift it. So we're going to start off playing it with my beat basically here. So 1 E and 2, E, and So doing it like that. So we're not doing, can't count like that. I've got to do it faster, right? Let me go back to the beginning. All right, so we hear it down with the beat. And if we come in on the, we'll hear the beat again, sorry. Simple, right? But now I'm going to come in on that next 16th note, and it's going to change the whole feel, right? So you see how right coming in on that, instead of coming on the downbeat, I come in on the 1, E, 1. I got to play the right notes. 1. So if I'm doing that and I'm adding that extra note in there, I can still come back around to the same spot. But if I just go and cut that off and do it the right way, and do 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I can take that same exact thing, that's what I'm basically saying, and move it around within that same beat. So you can do this with a metronome, right? So if you just play with a metronome doing this, it works too. But when you got the drum beat, that's where you get that Led Zeppelin backbeat thing, right? Where it seems like you're coming in on the and, because you are coming in on the and. So, you know, I played with a great drummer, and he would do that and just set a metronome up and do a fill that goes da-dun, 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 da-dun. And then he would just shift it over by a 16th and practice it. And then he'd just shift it by a 16th and practice it. It totally changes your feel of what you're playing. So really the whole point of this kind of part of you know, this lesson is take something that you know, but try to play it in a different place in the beat. All right. If you can play within the beat, I don't care what it is. It can be something as simple as 2, 3, 4. If you have to do that and come in on the, you know, basically it's syncopation, right? So what we're doing is we're changing where we come in on the beat. But if you start doing that and start playing around with doing some licks in there, I don't care what you play. If you're a guy who you can play that, great. If you can only play, then do that by trying to come in on a different beat, and it's going to show sort of you're playing in a whole new way. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that kind of concept? I know we're going to try to, you know, squeeze a lot into an hour here. So if anybody has any sort of question, yeah, absolutely. Certainly, absolutely. It's not about the notes, but it is basically rhythmic displacement. So we're moving those notes around. You can take anything, and that's why there are a million songs that use these 3 chords, but they don't all sound the same because of the differences of when you're changing chords and how you're shifting that rhythm around. So it's really manipulating and playing with the rhythmic stuff. Yes, there's some good stuff, guys. Yeah. So yeah, you always get live lessons going. Again, is always a good idea. So a lot of different things you can do with this, but I would strongly suggest playing with a metronome, which is cool, but sometimes a drum beat is easier to hear those changes. If you're playing something like that, just experiment with it, right? So play around with that a little bit. Absolutely, Breakdown by Tom Petty, another a really good example of this. There's so many songs that have this feel, you know. All of the songs that I talk about, like the Led Zeppelin backwards thing, like sort of how You Really Got Me comes in, you know, with the feels like it changes and shifts to the other beat. There's a lot of things like that. You can certainly do some of those with you know, chord progressions, but if you start doing it with lead licks and stuff, it gets really interesting. It can get pretty complex. So the next subject you know, want to talk about is this one of really doing taking your scale And once again, we're going to start with our minor pentatonic, right? Because everybody's playing that scale. So we're in A, so we're just playing an A minor pentatonic. But how can we take that and basically make it a little bit more interesting, right? A lot of students get stuck just playing right there, only playing those notes. So all of their solos, even when they get good and start playing some interesting stuff, they tend to sound like they're just playing the same thing harmonically. There's no other notes in there, right? So how can we add other notes? Do we need to play other solos or other scales? Do we need to learn another scale? Not necessarily. So here's an option I want to show you, which is basically adding notes to your pentatonic scale that will work in different situations. So for example, one that we sometimes add is our major third note, which is that guy, right? We can add that note in there. That's a really common blues thing, right? We hear that a lot, really. So we're kind of going back and forth between minor pentatonic and major pentatonic there. We can also add that note. So when I add that in there, right, pretty common. A little bit less common note might be something like replacing the flat 7 in our scale with the 6th, which is this one. So we're going to take this flat 7, which is here and here, and we're going to move it down to here and here. So now our pentatonic is this. That one there. So when would you use that? Well, for the most part, you'll find that you can use it over a lot of things in conjunction with the regular minor pentatonic. You can always go to that. But when you really find that jumps out is if you're playing over a chord that emphasizes that, or that has that in it, basically, right? So let me just throw in, I got a looper here. I'm just going to throw on a loop playing, instead of an A minor 7, the very first thing we did where we were doing the phrasing, that was over an A minor 7. So I'm just going to play over an A minor 6. So I'm going to put that 6 in there. So we're going to go, so that's sort of an A minor groove, right? But it's a minor 6. A lot of guys would play the A minor pentatonic, regular pentatonic over that. The problem is when I land on that 7, that flat 7 doesn't quite feel right. But now if I go down to the 6, that feels right. Right, much better. You can even tell when I go back up to that, it feels like that's wrong. So another like good example of this that's used a lot, that's not as jazzy as that, like more of a blues rock, like something like that, right? So if I loop that, so this is sort of a heavy blues rock thing. You'd think, oh yeah, that's A minor pentatonic all day. It sort of works, but the same thing. When I go to this note, that's that 6. So it's much better. If I hit that 7, I want to get off of it and make my landing note be that 6th, right? So hitting that 6th is basically kind of a cool thing, right? I play this all the time when I'm playing a blues progression and I'm going from this to the 4 chord, because in the 4 chord, that 6th is right here. It's the 3rd of the 4 chord, right? So that's when you get these. Right, that feel. But that's utilizing that 6th in there. So the point of this lesson is that it does not, it's not about learning a whole other scale. It's about looking at what note you could add in there. All right, how could I add a note to change the tonality of my solos? rather than think, oh my gosh, I got to learn this scale and this scale and this scale. Just think about notes that you can add in there. There are a lot of other notes we can dial in there and add as well. So if I'm playing something that's a dominant 7 chord, I wouldn't necessarily want to play that 6th in there, but I would want to probably not play just the minor 7 either, right? I'd want to have that flat 7 in there, but I'd like that major 3rd that we talked about to start with. So I would do more of a dominant type pentatonic, where I'm going to go that shape, which I love that scale. So that's one I'll always play, you know, when I'm playing over like a dominant 7 groove, right? So if we have a dominant 7 groove happening, like we might have somewhere here, a dominant 7 groove gives us that feel of the major 3rd and that flat 7. So we get both things. This, you'll hear a dominant 7 chord. So that's a sort of funky, bluesy stuff. Is always going to be cool. Right? See how that works? Pretty cool, right? It's got that 7, the major 3rd. Major 3rd, 7. So what else has a major 3rd and a flat 7 is going to be a Mixolydian scale. So we can go into Mixolydian here, which is cool. Right? So it's got a nice feel to it. It's the same kind of thinking, once again, instead of reinventing the entire you know, scale shape and making your brain think I'm learning a new scale. Try to, if you struggle with that, right? If you know a ton of scales, great, play this. If you are sort of a pentatonic player and sort of stuck in a rut, instead of worrying about learning a bunch of different cool scales that you have to learn, think more in terms of how can I spice up this minor pentatonic scale, right? That's what I want you to do with this lesson, okay? Is we're going to talk, when we get done, I've got one more thing I want to talk about, then I'm going to open up to questions and try to get into some of the questions you guys have, so hang tight. The last thing I want to talk about as our third way to kind of make your solo sound more interesting is something that jazz players and country players tend to do already. Rock players and blues players tend to not do as much, which is change up your scale when the chord changes. So follow the changes, right? Play over the changes. Rock guys and blues guys usually tend to start off with the mentality of whatever the chords are doing, I'm just going to find a scale and I'm just going to blaze over that thing, right? I'm going to play the same scale. So we're playing, you know, I'm going to play, I'm going to play my, over the whole thing. Don't think about it. If I play something, you know, like this, and I'm going to play these chords, I'm just going to play over the whole thing. So what if we change our thinking up a little bit and take a simple chord progression? As a matter of fact, I just did a new course with TrueFire. It's not out. It's not going to be out for a couple months. But it's basically based on theory. So there's some theory stuff in there. But one of the theoretical concepts is this, is playing over changes. And what I'm really doing is using the caged system for looking at chords, but I'm changing my scale to go with my chords, right? So I'm going to play a chord progression that's going to go D, G, and A, right? So we've played that a million times, right? And what do we do with that? It's when we approach that, a lot of times we think, oh, well, I'm just going to play my D major pentatonic over that, or the relative minor, right? I'm just going to blaze over that. But if I thought I'm going to play these little chord fragments and play D here, and then I'm going to play D major pentatonic, this G, G major pentatonic, A major pentatonic, back to D, D, D major pentatonic, G, G major pentatonic, A major pentatonic, D. So what I'm doing is I'm just moving around the neck. So, you know, there's more to understand to that. You have to be able to play chords in different places. But the real point of this lesson is getting your ear to think more about where the chords are going, right? So your chords are changing, and you're going to play a scale that goes with that. So you're going to follow that. So that's what we want to get that thinking about. So what I'm doing is I'm changing my scale to go with the chord. So just another concept to think about that I want you guys to try to start thinking about, instead of always just hearing a chord progression and saying, I'm just going to solo over that, right? We don't want to get stuck in that rut. We want to get to where you can actually move through. So the key to knowing that is knowing the caged system and understanding the chords, how I can play a D chord there, and 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 then knowing the major pentatonic scales that go with each one of those chords, if that makes sense. All right? So those are my three concepts, right? The first one being just shift your rhythm, right? So rhythmic displacement. Take your, whatever you're playing, shift it over an 8th note to start with. Then try shifting it a 16th note. The second concept is take a minor pentatonic scale, simple scale, but look at adding a note in there. Add the 6th or add the 9th, add the major 3rd. See what notes you can add into that scale rather than think you have to totally change scale. And the last concept is don't be afraid to, even if you're playing something bluesy or more of a rock thing, don't be afraid to change your scale over the top of each chord progression as it goes by, or each chord as it goes by, right? So having said all that, I know that's a lot of stuff to cram into what was a, you know, sort of a half hour of talking about that. So I want to try to answer any questions that anybody has. I know a couple guys posted some questions beforehand. One was if I had a pre-gig routine, right? So that one always makes me chuckle, because when my band was on the road a lot here a few years ago, we toured all over the Midwest mostly, but really about anywhere, playing clubs. You know, we're doing original stuff, so it was one night stands, one night gigs. But we were, you know, we didn't have roadies. We're a working band, right? So my pre-routine gig was, you know, backing the trailer up to the door and schlepping gear up on stage, and then by the, you know, once it's all loaded out, pretty much taking a Hammond B3 and trying to get it through a door that's too small and scratching up my knuckles, and then, you know, crawling around on a beer-soaked carpet stage trying to plug my amp in. And so really my pre-gig routine, what did I do to warm up? Usually it was the first 3 songs. That's basically where you get to, right? So in better situations, especially like doing clinics and stuff where, you know, good playing is pretty crucial right off the bat, I do things like some basic chord progressions. So I take chords and do basically like a Mickey Baker jazz book, right? So Mickey Baker jazz, where we're doing like a major 7, major 6, minor 7, minor 6, and then you move that whole thing up a half step. So you're just keeping moving up. So stuff like this, right, where it's sort of rote and you just drill on it, but it just gets your fingers used to doing something. It's great exercise. You just keep going over. It's kind of a no-brainer. I like to warm up with some things that are more physical and don't really require me to think a lot musically. So there's that. There's like just basic chromatic. Because that's, once again, that's something I can have my guitar turned down and be talking to somebody about why the lights don't work out there on stage and just play this, right? I'm just playing through it. So I'm just getting my fingers to warm up. Then there's sort of the musical side where I might do a series of, you know, some kind of classical picking thing just to get my picking going. But that's kind of it. So it's like a 2 parts really. The main part is the not a lot of thinking, not a lot of musicality. It's really more by rote. Just get your hands used to doing that. Then once again, usually you get into the first song and now you're playing music and you're okay. Now, if I had the luxury of having, you know, an hour to practice and warm up, I would go through a lot of different exercises and things with a metronome, and then I would also just start doing some soloing. You know, whatever. Start just working out licks. You know, just playing different licks and things like that that are more musical. So that was sort of the answer to that question. Let me get in here and try to get. Sorry, guys, these are flying past me, so I'm afraid if I miss them out here. Breaking up practice sessions. Wow, that's of course, you know, I love to talk about practice and have a course called Smart Practice for guitar. If I were to really condense that to what we can sort of talk about here, the key is having a plan. And doing a couple things. To start with, identify your goal. You know, I see a lot of guitar players who tend to just be floating along. And are you getting better? I don't know. What do you want to do? Not sure. So have a specific goal. Like, I want to be able to, in 6 months, I want to know 6 songs that I could get on stage and play with them in a, you know, in a band situation, even just a jam situation. You have a goal. Second part is assess where you are. This is one part that I think, you know, students miss, is because they're not really sure how to assess where they are. In Smart Practice, I go over basically a system of making lists of what you already know. It's really important to write everything down so you sort of have it organized, and then you can see, okay, I'm here, but in order to reach my goal, I have to get to here. So you want to fill in that gap from between where you are and where you want to be, right? And then, of course, you know, having some way to track this. So I strongly advise everyone use, you know, a practice journal. Even on, you know, on the TrueFire website, there's a cool place where you can make practice notes. You know, something as simple as that, just making notes at what you did. So always, if you're playing with a metronome and you played, you know, this lick at 120 beats per minute today, write that down, because tomorrow when you start playing that, you start doing it like this. Is that 120? I don't know. It's hard to say, right? You sometimes get stuck in a rut. So you have to look and say, ah, I need to bump it up. So another thing about practicing is always pushing sort of your envelope, right? Pushing the ceiling, basically playing on the edge. That will really help you. So breaking up your session, definitely crucial is breaking it up into segments, so you're not just playing one thing the whole time. I do it in 3 sections. One is the warm-up section. The next is the biggest section, which we're really working on all kinds of things. And the last section is always having fun. So like jamming, having fun, I save that to the end of a practice session. It's like the payoff, you know? You do the hard work on the front end, and then there's the payoff later. So, sorry, let me get to some of these. Doing a jam survival guide. I so badly want to jam. Any words of encouragement? Absolutely, man. I would say, and Pablo, let me get to that if I don't get to your question here. But words of encouragement for jamming is just go do it. Everybody can jam, right? It's not nearly as scary as most players think. I encourage everybody to just go to a jam night and say, I want to get up and jam. If you barely know anything, don't be afraid to tell the jam host or somebody there, say, man, I really want to do this. I only know 2 songs, right? I only know these 3 chords. I can only do whatever it is that you can play. You know, try to get some, you have to have something down, but then go do it and just jump up and play. Once you jam once, the second time is so much easier. You know, it's like, ah, I did that, you know, no big deal. And honestly, the best thing I can tell you is nobody is really going to be judging you there, right? Like you think they are, right? Everybody thinks, oh man, I'm going to get up and, you know, somebody's going to record this and put it on Facebook and it's going to be terrible. You know, nobody is really judging you. If you're a beginner or if somebody who hasn't jammed, nobody expects you to be, you know, play like Guthrie Govan out there. You know, they expect you to do this because that's what, you know, beginner jammers do, right? And if you're playing with other musicians, especially, who are good players, you know, they're not gonna you know, judge you or worry about that. And when you're playing with good players, they're not gonna try to make you look bad. You know, as a matter of fact, just the opposite. They'll play down just so you can feel comfortable. I've seen it a million times. I've played with guys that were amazing players, you know, that didn't try to make me look bad by playing with me, you know, when I wasn't as good as they were, you know. So just jump in. Don't hesitate to schedule a jam and go do it. No question you can do it. I guarantee it, or your money back. Pablo asked about that last thing I played, if I was playing caged, and yes, those were all caged chords, right? So, but they were partial caged chords. So when I got into this chord, that was from this D chord, right? That G form of the D chord, but I just played this part of it. And then I played the scale that goes with that, the major pentatonic, which would be here. And then I played the G, I just played this part, which is from this, the C form of my G chord, right? Basically this guy. And then I played, my lick was from the pentatonic that goes with that. And then for the A, I think I played this, just the partial A, which is basically from the D shape. And then as I moved down, I did the same thing. So yes, that was all caged, basically. So I don't really play and focus most of my playing on caged. I think more in terms of the major scale shapes as I go up and down. But the caged is really a cool way to see the neck in a pretty useful way. Awesome. So all good. Let me see what else we got here. The 3-part idea to practice. Yes, thank you for the plug on the Smart Practice course. It's done really well. I've been so far so good. So you know, if you guys have any other questions, definitely, you know, feel free to reach out to me on the TrueFire website. You know, I do have several courses there, and yeah, I think all of my courses are on sale this week. So if you're digging it and want to buy something, this isn't like a sales webinar where you watch it for an hour and then at the very end they don't tell you anything except, hey, you should buy this. You know, I get sucked into those webinars all the time, so didn't want this to be that. This is just you know, something cool that TrueFire is going to start doing, which is these live events. This is the first one, so you're groundbreaking here. And we're going to do a lot more of them. So it's just a cool way to connect with you guys as students, which is why I do my classroom on TrueFire. One of the coolest things about it is being able to share videos like this back and forth and watch a student's video and really interact, because that's a lot more fun. I love doing courses where you can put something out and somebody can check it out, but teaching live and answering some questions is definitely better. Yes, sorry. I would say Derek Bays, I would say for sure phrasing is experimentation. You know, it's a big way of breaking out of a rut. And look, learning songs. I'm not huge at I'm not huge about learning songs. When I started, I didn't just sit down and just learn songs. I always wanted to play my own songs, you know. So I wrote a lot. But like learning other people's songs, and especially their phrasing. So like I take like a guy who's a really simple player in a lot of ways, like B.B. King is a perfect example, right? You hear a B.B. King lick and you think, oh man, that's the most awesome thing in the world. And then you learn it and it's just, you know, something maybe as simple as that, but it sounds amazing because of how he plays it, how he phrases it, where he puts it in there, right? His vibrato, all the little things, you know? So you can learn a lot by learning some of those licks that may sound, you know, doable, but they're really cool, and they're really cool because of how it's phrased in there. So learning someone else's phrases, and don't let yourself get stuck just learning one player's phrase. You know, we all tend to say, I want to jam on these songs. I saw someone asked about learning songs and trying to remember songs. You know, remembering songs was always my weakness, as a matter of fact. So the funny thing about that is that's part of the reason why I just wanted to play my own thing, because I'd learn a solo and it's like, man, I'd forget it. So I always had to have a backup plan, which was understanding where that solo came from. Like I remember doing I obviously don't remember it, but doing you know, Don't Tell Me You Love Me by Night Ranger, and that whole solo, and it's such an awesome solo. When that record came out, I was like just a huge Night Ranger fan, right? That was like my guitar thing. So I learned all these licks, and then the band I was playing, I wanted to play that. And it's like, man, it was so hard learning and remembering all those notes and in there. So you know, I figured out what was happening there. So if I got stuck in the Brad Gillis part, I could just start, you know, grab my whammy bar and I could be in the same, you know, scale position he was in, and I could pull it off to where it was pretty close. It sounded, you know, like that, even though it wasn't the same notes. So I always had the backup plan when I learned songs. I think a lot of times students don't do that, right? They just learn the song and then they go to a jam night and they mess up and they lose their place and they don't have any idea what to do because they didn't learn the theory behind that solo. Oh, he was in a Dorian scale and he was, you know, emphasizing the natural sixth note. You know, if you know that, then you get lost. You can sort of fake it, you know. I always got accused of that by my band members when I was playing in a cover band anyway. I was sort of faking it. Awesome. Michael, you missed your train because you were digging this? Oh, man. You know, sorry, a couple things. There's a couple of talking about altered dominance. There's someone talking about playing outside. There's a couple of things. And yes, I believe this will be archived on TrueFire, so you can go back and check it out. You know, basically, sorry, reading all the comments. I appreciate everybody, you know, commenting. Outside stuff, I mean, that's a whole, we probably don't got time to go deep into that, but I will say this. A couple things about playing outside things is there's usually some good theory behind why it sounds cool and why it works. You know, if I play a half whole diminished thing, if I'm playing it over something that it makes logical sense, then it's not as, even though it sounds outside, like let me do like a Hendrix chord thing, right? Right, we all know that. So if we're playing this, you know, bluesy rock groove, like you might play at a jam night, and you're playing this, that Hendrix chord, right, which is the E7 sharp 9. So most guys will just play what over that? They'll play minor pentatonic, right? They'll go up here and start playing, which is totally cool. You know, Jimmy played a lot of that, so it works. But if I know that right there is this scale, which comes from my half whole diminished that's right there, I can throw that in. I can go and do the normal stuff, but then I could go. Right, just a simple little walking up that scale sounded cool, and it sounded like, oh, that's a little outside, right? It sounded different, right? It wasn't that different because that scale works perfectly over. Fits great over that, right? But it's in contrast with playing the really simple pentatonic thing that made it seem like, wow, that was kind of wacky, you know? I mean, I can do pentatonic stuff and do like a, you know, go out there and do that triad outside that everybody does, that sort of like a Robin Ford kind of triad thing. You can obviously just shift and play up a whole step or up a half step, down a half step. But most of the cool stuff, like one of my favorite players is Jimmy Herring, right? So Jimmy Herring plays a lot of awesome stuff that has definitely got a little outside feel to it. But when you really break it down, even if he's outside playing chromatically, he's going somewhere, you know? So it's like all of a sudden it sounds like that was weird, but then it's right back into, you know, total Jimmy Herring, you know? Those kind of licks, you know? Those sort of fake slide licks. Probably learned all that by spending all the time he did with Derek Trucks, who's not a fake slide player. It's real. All right, so let me just jump back into a couple of other things. Yeah, a good point, Rick. Playing a sax phrase and learning it on guitar really opens things up. So like, you know, we have a great course at TrueFire with, you know, Mike Stern and Bill Evans, where it's basically Bill sort of playing a saxophone lick and then Mike's playing it on guitar. And while he's copying it, one of my favorite, and I, you know, that lick. It's a Charlie Parker lick, right? All those kind of licks right there that I just learned by listening to Charlie Parker, you know, cassettes, I guess. Can't say records. You know, because there's all kinds of cool little phrases there that I wouldn't play as a guitar player. So then you sort of absorb those into your vocabulary. And that to me is more interesting, learning those kind of licks than it is learning, you know, guitar player licks. You know, we've all spent plenty of time learning, you know, useless, you know, useless things like that. That's like really cool, but completely useless as far as really using it in most musical settings from a guitar player. But, you know, when you learn stuff from other instruments, it's very cool. So, yes, Jimmy Herring. I love Jimmy Herring. Let's look at any other questions. Yes, Night Ranger. Love me some Night Ranger. Songwriting. Wow, songwriting. Another whole subject. I will just say this about songwriting. To me, that it was the point of why I started playing guitar. I started writing songs right off the bat. I didn't know any better. Nobody told me, hey, you should learn this or that. I just started making stuff up. That was the fun of it for me. Back when I started playing, I grew up in the country in Iowa, right? So there's no other guitar players around. This is, believe it or not, before the internet. And, you know, I listened to other, you know, songs, listen to records and stuff, but to me the point was, well, I wanted to write my own stuff. So that's where I always went, was just writing stuff. So my process is, I guess, first it's thinking, and it's more visual. So because I do a lot of instrumental stuff, I think of a picture, and I write based on that. So I get a picture in my head. Actually, segue into a really cool project that I'm doing right now with a really good friend of mine named Rodney Matthews, who's a real famous fantasy artist. He's done album covers for the Scorpions and Nazareth and Asia. So we're doing a project together based on his art. So how I wrote these songs for this album we're doing is basically looking at his picture. He's got these very vivid, amazing, you know, 70s fantasy art type stuff. So I would just look at that, this picture of this big, you know, caribou looking creature, you know, standing on a mountain, and I would think, what music goes there, you know, and then I would kind of try to come up with a riff. So it was a matter of thinking of it beforehand. So anyway, so just a process that I use a lot, and that's an awesome project that we're so excited about it. Hopefully be out this next year. I've got Rick Wakeman from Yes playing keys, which is an amazing honor to have him on the record. John Payne from Asia. You know, just a lot of really cool players are playing on this record. So it's going to be coming out. We've been working on it a long time, but it's almost done. Where are my dogs? Brad wants to know. My one dog, Towser, is at the chiropractor right now, so he can't be here. He's getting the chiropractic treatment. Killian is over there. She's sleeping. She's used to being in the studio. They're basically studio dogs. Look at all you guys asking crazy questions like disc golf. Yeah, you know, Harold, I have so little time to play disc golf. I'm always playing with my dogs, as you know. I never can go to disc golf tournaments because I'm always out with my dogs. So. Yeah, good question. Do I ever alternate between staying in scale and then playing with the changes? Absolutely. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with that normal rock guy thing of I'm gonna, you know, you're doing this and you're gonna go. You're gonna play that Stairway to Heaven and basically just play right there. But you can also then find those next, you know, and follow the chords. So following the chords is sometimes like what we call like playing the sweet notes, right? We're targeting chord tones. So targeting chord tones is if I have, you know, right? So I'm really just sort of arpeggiating the chords and following those. So you can definitely go back and forth between doing some of that and playing those sweet notes and following the chords, and then just flat out, you know, blazing away wherever. How do I work out songs for this? Or how do I work out drums for the songs that I'm writing? I use I don't have it up. maybe I do. I would pull it up. Well, it's not live. I use a program called Drum Core, where I use beats from there. So there's a ton of loops basically. You know, when I'm playing stuff and I'm doing stuff for my courses or doing stuff like this is just a loop, right? You know, I play with an amazing drummer. So when I'm actually doing songs and writing material for a record, I will kind of come up with the basic beat and then let him write the drum part because he's a better drummer than I am. But when I'm putting together stuff in here or putting together stuff for demos, I use Drum Core. And I've got a bunch of different samples from all kinds of, you know, Terry Bozzio and all these different guys that are really cool. You know, I'm not a great drummer myself, so I have a drum machine over here that I try to stay away from. Jimmy Herring lick at the punch-in. There's a lot of cool Jimmy Herring licks. That's the one, I think maybe one that's on the. It's like a country Jimmy Herring thing, but yeah, he's amazing. Let's go. Whiz Bang, 1963, my friend says, any hard and fast rules on what note to play over the, sorry, I've lost my chat here, over the 4 chord? You know, well, number one, there's, you know, hard and fast rules. I hate to think in terms of hard and fast rules, but you know, you use your ear, right? That seems like such a cop-out to tell students when they're playing and trying to pick sweet notes or play over chord changes, but it's really true, right? If I'm playing over the 4 chord, and if it's this chord, you know, my ear says play that note. I love that note there, but you could play this note. You could play this. I believe somewhere back in the question, someone was asking about playing major and minor in the same song. So a great place to think about that is when you're playing the blues, right? So over the blues, we play the blues, and over the 1 chord, we play major pentatonic. And when we go to the 4 chord, we play minor pentatonic. Back to major pentatonic. Right? So in that case, we're emphasizing on that 4 chord, that note, you know. So any notes that you play that are within the chord, so two ways to think about when you're playing, trying to pick a note to land on over a chord, right? The first way is play a note in the chord, right? That's like a no-brainer. That's what I was doing before, where, you know, playing like arpeggiating. Only playing notes within the chord. So if you're playing major and minor chords, you're playing, you know, 1 3 5 or 1 flat 3 5. The other option is to play a note that extends the chord, right? So if we're thinking about that, like if I play that 4 chord, sorry to ramble on about this, but if I play this 4 chord, right, I could play this note. And check that out. So that is not in that chord, right? Let me get a loop going here if my looper will function. So let me just play that chord. So if I play any notes, sorry, I got to get a better loop. Sorry, guys. One more time on my looper. I could go there. I can go there. Those are all notes in that chord. But if I go here, that's pretty cool, right? So why does that work? Here's the way my brain thinks, right? Why does that work? Why does that sound so cool? It's because if I'm playing this 9th chord, right? If I add that note, right, that makes that a 13 chord. So that changes that from a D9 to a D13. So in effect, if the rhythm guitar player is playing this chord and I play this, the sound that comes out of the speaker is a 13. So when I'm picking notes for soloing, I think about that. what's the sound that comes out, not what's the keyboard player doing and the bass player and the other guitar player and me, but what collectively are we creating? We're creating a 13 chord, or we do that same thing and we have that going, right? And I could go. So there, so now we listen to that, we go, okay, what is that? Well, that's not as cool as that, right? So you got to think, when you play those notes, you can't just randomly put a note in there that from wherever. You got to think, what happens to the chord when you put that note into there, all right? That makes sense. So that's sort of that. Yeah, somebody else asked, sorry, about what I'm playing through, and I'm playing through, I'm sure I'll mess this up. I'm playing through that guy right there, which is a Kemper. That's what I'm playing through with that. So I'm playing through that Kemper profiler, and then it's just coming through the speakers. So everything you're hearing guitar-wise is just through my studio speaker, and the same thing with the loop. So I'm not running direct into the computer. So everything is just being picked up from my webcam here. So it's all live stuff. Let's see, what else do we got? Man, you know, Matthew is a good question about learning different kinds of music. You know, I would say, you know, you should learn everything, but the reality is we live in a crazy fast-paced world, and it's hard to get enough time to practice one thing, you know. So you got to kind of pick and choose where your focus is, you know, where you could actually, you know, where do you want to start? Do you want to learn some classical music? Do you want to learn to play fingerstyle stuff? You want to be able to go, you know, is that beneficial to you if you aren't really interested? Probably not. Can you pick stuff up by learning other kinds of music? Absolutely. So you hear a player like a Jimmy Herring and you think, man, he's playing over a regular blues thing. You hear him like on some of those the Allman Brothers records, or you know, the live versions of those Allman Brothers. I'm a Herring fan, so I have all these crazy bootleg tapes of him. But you know, you hear him playing over that straightforward Allman Brothers stuff, which is pretty much Dorianville, and he's doing all this crazy weird stuff because he sort of knows that jazz theory, right? He's learned a lot of that. He's studied a lot of that. So if you want to sound like that, you probably have to delve into that. You can't just magically, you know, make that up. Same thing with like some of the classical kind of stuff, you know. I was, of course, a huge neoclassical fan, you know, the Rising Force record and all that stuff. Well, that turned us all on to go, wow, we should learn some Bach. You know, we should learn some different things. So we all sat around, you know, we started getting our Bach chops down, you know, because we wanted to be able to bring that over into the rock side of things. So it just depends upon what kind of stuff you want to do. If all you care about is, you know, playing blues, and you don't like anything else, you don't want to listen to anything else, you can play blues, you know. It's sort of up to you. So I would encourage you to learn as much as you can, because that makes the most sense to my brain. I always pick up different things when I learn some little jazz thing or learn a classical bit. But definitely, you know, as much as you can will be helpful. Mackerlane, no, this won't. I can't go over it again, but you can sign up for a private lesson with me if you want. Jeff Mackerlane will be doing one of these live events in the upcoming future here for TrueFire. So awesome, awesome guys. I think we're doing good. It's got any more questions here? We're about ready to wrap this up, and let's see what we can. I have a phone call coming in from Brad. Let's see what Brad has to say. Hello, Brad. He's telling me to wrap this thing up. I knew that was probably, it's like the big hook coming and yanking me off. So anyway, guys, good jazz blues pickup band, first time. Oh man, good luck. Spicy licks. No, but if you make a mistake, just make a really evil look at the bass player. That's the key. So don't worry about what you play, but if you mess up, just look at the bass player like, oh man, I can't work with this guy, and you'll be fine. All right, guys. So anyway, I want to say thank you all for tuning in, and once again, feel free to shout out to me anytime, and look for more of these coming up, because we're going to do a lot more. And I'll hopefully do one too. We got a bunch of guys scheduled here, but I will do one. So if you have anything that you want me to go over that you'd like to see me cover, you know, shoot me a message, and we'll do it. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Have a good night. And remember, there's Kelly. Kelly, come here. Come here. She's going to come and says, I got to be on the air. Yes, you're a good girl. You're a good girl. Yes. All right, guys. Play hard. Practice smart. Play hard. You know the drill. Thanks, guys. See you soon.